You have been watching the Oddity Archive, proudly serving the fringe geek community since 2012. Unfortunately, due to some recent consolidation within the geek community, after today we will no longer be allowed to create and post new content. In these final moments, we will attempt one last retrospective. We would like to thank you for supporting us over the last 3 years, but, like all good things, this too must come to an end. Again, thank you, and almost goodbye. And welcome to the final edition of the Oddity Archive. It really hurts to say that. Let me try and explain here. The powers that be within the geek community got together recently, and a bunch of our shows are getting the axe, which is kind of weird because Archive doesn't even really belong to any networks or anything. But, normally I would just say screw you to something like that. But unfortunately, they took it to a higher authority, a certain major corporate entity that has a certain control over Archive. And they agreed. And as such, after today, we are forced to shut down the Archive. Oh, and you're going to love the reason. The official reason for this is we have been deemed obsolete. Oh, the delicious irony. Anyway, I figured we should close things out with something good and appropriate, and certainly in archive land. So, today, we take a look at the death of analog TV.
Japan's miraculous post-war recovery and its emergence as an economic colossus. And now, a new technology could add to Japan's wealth. HD TV, high-definition television. Have you heard of it? Well, as you'll see in a moment, it could soon revolutionize television as we know it. The Japanese have been developing this for some time.
Going as far back as 1974, Panasonic had developed a TV prototype capable of displaying up to 1,125 lines of resolution, though there was nothing at the time to really test such things. Starting in the late 70s, Japan's NHK Science and Technical Research Laboratories began work on a method of compressing video signal as a means of, as implied, cramming more signal into less space. The upshot of this was that a, theoretically, higher quality image could be transmitted over the airwaves using a fraction of the currently necessary amount of bandwidth. Finalized in 1982, NHK's new format became known as the Muse High-Vision Standard. Yes, the same one used on the subsequent High-Vision Laserdisc system. The Muse Standard was really an enhanced analog signal with, conveniently enough, 1,125 lines of resolution, a 16:9 widescreen aspect ratio, and a 2:1 compression ratio. In the late 80s, the first Muse broadcasts went out over the Japanese airwaves. Now, while I haven't found any concrete sources, the Muse standard was apparently a bit problematic, in part due to the limitations of the standard TV at the time. Most commonly, motion shots, especially ones at a decent speed, would result in ghosting, a la a bad frame rate conversion. On a related note, despite starting to transition to proper digital broadcasting in 2003, the Muse standard remained in place to some degree as late as 2007. Here in North America, we operate on the standard set by the Advanced Television Systems Committee, or ATSC, first established in 1993. As of this episode, broadcasters are allowed the following specs: up to a 16:9 widescreen aspect ratio image of up to 1080 pixels in the MPEG-2 compression format. Audio-wise, broadcasters are allowed up to 5.1 channel Dolby Digital AC3 sound, like on most DVDs. As a result of the compression, broadcasters can also offer some lower definition alternate broadcasts and still stay within the usual allotted 6 MHz of bandwidth for TV. In 1996, the Telecommunications Act of 1996 was signed into law. This was the first reappraisal of the overall telecommunications industry since 1934. One of the many provisions of this bill was to commence the ability for TV broadcasters to broadcast in the ATSC digital standard, albeit via a second frequency. This, of course, would lead to an eventual transition to all digital broadcasting. Initially, this transition was to be carried out by December 31st, 2006.
On August 6th of this year, WRAL-TV was the first television station to broadcast in high definition.
As of 1996, TVs with digital tuners weren't really a thing yet. Indeed, the technology to implement these new standards on TVs wasn't really there yet. Despite that, the first experimental digital broadcast in the US occurred on July 23, 1996, on Raleigh, North Carolina CBS affiliate WRAL. A little over 2 years later, in August of 1998, the first HD TVs, from Panasonic, went on sale in San Diego, California only, due to the close proximity of the factory. These sets started at the low price of $2,800. In October, HDTV crossed the line from experimental to standard broadcasting, and few stations or people seem to care.
They might let you decide.
Is shopping for HDTV, but he says a top-of-the-line setup is a bit steep.
With all these fancy speakers, this came up to $99.66.76. I was going to see if I could get them to knock that 76 cents off there before I bought. I'm not buying this, incidentally, right now anyway.
As I mentioned, the government's initial deadline to kick over to digital was on December 31st, 2006. The Digital Transition and Safety Act of 2005 pushed the date back to February 17, 2009. This was due to the fact that HDTV tuners were only just becoming standard, and even then only on larger TVs. Smaller TVs didn't get them till 07. This pushback was also due to the government subsidizing, at the forced hand of electronics manufacturers, the cost of converter boxes for those with older TVs unable to afford a converter box. The final deadline to kick over to digital came on June 12, 2009, with nightlight service available for select stations for up to another 30 days, and this applied only to full power stations. Having said that, some stations, and even the entire market of Wilmington, North Carolina, started pulling the plug on analog broadcasts as early as September of 2008.
Digital, or your equipment is not working properly. If you subscribe to a pay TV service like cable or satellite, you should call your provider immediately.
By the time the US pulled the plug on full-power stations, Japan and a fair chunk of Europe, including Finland, Switzerland, Germany, Denmark, Norway, and a few others, had already kicked over to digital. As of this episode, the US has yet to finish its own transition to digital, as low-powered analog stations are still allowed. Having said that, we are on the edge of going over completely to digital. Barring any further delays, on September 1st, 2015, what's left of the low-power analog TV stations, mostly those little translator stations for remote rural areas, will finally go off the air.
Most TV sets sold in the last 2 to 3 years have digital tuners.
As of this episode, the digital TV transition is still in progress in a fair chunk of the world, especially in parts of Eastern Europe, South America, the Middle East, and Asia. A few countries, like Ethiopia and North Korea, have no intentions of kicking over. Other places, like most of Africa, have simply stayed silent on the matter. Meanwhile, some countries, most notably Canada, while officially digital, have no requirement for all markets to kick over. Canada has 28 markets that were required to go digital, but outside of that, normal old analog broadcasts are, as of this episode, clear to carry on for the foreseeable future.
She's got my cantaloupe, and she hasn't paid for it.
All right, you own the store, right?
She here every day and paws over the fruit. She punches holes in them. Then she throws it on the fruit.
It seems like the end of analog TV has created some unintended consequences. Most notably, unlike analog, and despite the higher resolution, digital TV tends to be an all-or-nothing proposition in terms of reception, leading to problems in overcrowded and/or remote areas. Also, in the years since the switchover, people have been trying to unload their old tube TVs to the point where most thrift stores won't take them, and recycling is a costly proposition. The upshot of this has been that people have resorted to throwing out their TVs, leading to a bit more of an e-waste problem than usual. Here in the States, the government has maintained that the digital switchover was to free up the airwaves for first responders and such, and to sell off bandwidth to cell phone carriers and internet providers. Now, fool that I am, I personally would have liked to have seen more of the UHF airwaves opened up to licensed hobbyists and stuff, but I guess that don't make the old government as much money. But I'm sure you're not here to hear my opinions on such matters. So, switching gears here, I have long maintained that the art of the sign-off died sometime in the 90s, so it was actually really heartening to see some of the broadcasters try and make some effort at a proper send-off. And if nothing else, at least they would allow you to watch, like, the master engineer press the button to turn off the transmitter, while unsurprisingly, others just could not have cared less.
It gives you a 50-mile-per-gallon rating.
No hidden fees, none.
Hidden fees are annoying.
$50 unlimited.
$1 million in the garbage. Finders keepers.
If you go back to his father, Abraham, you'll find that in a...
New ways internet predators stalk and seduce your children. Next up.
The great analog sign-off, unsurprisingly, caused a few problems for the poor, the elderly, the lazy, and so on. But strangely enough, the broadcasters had some problems too, and chief among them was that after the switchover, some stations were having problems with interference, to the point where they actually had to ask the government to reassign their place in the frequency spectrum. And even funnier than that is, at the actual moment of analog sign-off, some stations just could not avoid that one last gasp of just good old-fashioned analog technical difficulty sort of moments.
Seinfeld, weeknights at 6:30 and 10.
Hello, I'm Mike DeSirio from the National Association of Broadcasters. Watch TV antennas. If you're seeing this message, this television set has not yet been upgraded to digital, or your equipment is not working properly. To continue watching free television with an antenna, you have to upgrade in one of two ways.
The beginning of the digital age. In less than a minute, our analog television signal is shutting off forever,
has ceased regular programming on our analog channel, and all our analog operations will terminate at 8 a.m. this morning. Our analog operations will terminate at 8 a.m. this morning.
Digital transition, and
you can enjoy all your regular Fox Toledo programming on our digital channel 40.
To purchase airtime or advertise on WOAC, call Ron Rembert at 330-677-6760.
You are watching WOAC Canton, Cleveland, Channel 67 and Channel 47 digital television.
I know where you live, beyond.
Now, the stations that got it right really got it right. Some of them aired little retrospectives, some of them dusted off their old test cards, some of them ran High Flight for one last time, some of them that still had their 70s, 80s era sign-off sequences lying around gave those one last airing. And so what I'd like to do here to close things out as the light dims is to give a little salute, show a little montage of the stations that just nailed it.
CBS TV will cease broadcasting regular analog programming on Channel 2, permanently effective with this sign-off. The next regularly scheduled broadcast on WCBS TV Analog will be Nightlight Public Service Announcements at 3 p.m. Good day. Analog TV may be dead-ish, but it doesn't mean that TV simply ceased to exist. And I suppose that's the lesson to be learned here. We just gotta learn to keep rolling with the changes, I guess. I mean, we've gotten so damn good at it. But, anyway, join us next time, some way, somehow. Maybe the same old way if I can find a loophole, because I really don't want this to be the last archive episode, but join us next time, whenever that may be, for more archivisms. But just in case we don't make it back, I want to run a good old-fashioned sign-off clip that I have made just for us, even though we're not actually a broadcast. This has been the Oddity Archive. Our studio is located somewhere in the high rolling hills of beautiful downtown Aurora, not transmitting from or to anywhere in particular by our own damn authority. Because, we have this internet thing now and a transmitter just isn't necessary. In a bit of appropriate symbolism, we proudly display this seal of out of practice. Isn't it pretty? Most of the outside footage seen on the archive is used according to the fair use doctrine, allowing for critique, informational purposes, and parody. Footage from the Oddity archive may be reused in part, but please not in whole, for the same purposes. Original and, in some contexts, public domain content is the property of the Oddity archive. You don't screw with us, we don't screw with you. Anyway, once again, we would like to thank you for your support over the last 3-ish years. Until such a time that we are able to resume service, the Oddity archive now leaves the hypothetical air. Goodbye.